Okay, so, hmm. Okay, so Angie, I shared with you yesterday that since I'm recording my experience, this is the first time I'll be recording my experience of my first ayahuasca journey um, electronically. And so I'm using this as an opportunity to create a story, a recorded story that I can share in other spaces as well. So thank you to you for hearing me, and thank you to everyone who will hear this in the future. Um, hmm. Yeah, after I've shared the journey very in depth. Well, I've shared it to varying depths, about 4 times now. 3 of those times were very deep. Um, and while I love sharing it, and there is such an importance in each of us speaking our true experience, it's also uh, time consuming and requires great presence. And I don't want that to take away from my integration process. So, this is a lovely way of me recording my experience and then being able to share it with more people in a way that is more efficient for my time. Yeah. So I attended my first ayahuasca ceremony at a place near Chicago, about 5 hours north of St. Louis. Um, yeah, so I drove to the train station and um, took a train to Chicago and got a taxi to the retreat center type place. Um, my AirPod died. I'm hoping that it's still connected. Hoping that it's still connected. Um, that the other one is connected. Um, so I've been feeling very available, committed to, here for the ayahuasca experience. I had turned down a number of previous opportunities to attend Aya ceremonies for various reasons. Essentially, they didn't feel right. And this experience has continued to feel at least good enough. Maybe not perfect, but good enough for my first time. And yeah, I have been feeling very like confident and excited for the process. And the last 2 hours of that train trip, oh my God, they were just, oh my God, chaotic, inside and outside. Feeling the inner turmoil start to creep in, the fear, the anxiety. The train is full, noisy. Chicago's fucking Chicago. And yeah, and train was late. Uber app wouldn't work. Blah blah blah. It's all the mess. Just like ah! Very similar to when I act on stage, is that I'm really excited and really confident, and then like right at the last minute I start to feel a little nervous. Ooh. So I had a really lovely taxi cab driver, everything's just perfect, of course, as it always is. Perfect taxi driver for that night, and and I ended up arranging with him to pick me up the next morning. So I made that safety net for myself. That felt good. And as he dropped me off at the Little House of Glencoe, this really lovely retreat center, very similar to a like a very, very simple modern log cabin, and just gorgeous, a gorgeous place. And I found myself feeling, I had come back to my center. I had settled. I was feeling still very stimulated, but confident again, and ready for it. Um, Amazing facilitator, amazing people. I was, I think, the youngest, well, other than one person, the youngest by probably, about 2 decades. One of the younger people there, maybe not, but 1 to 2 decades. The crowd was significantly older than me, and that felt good. I felt very, not just because of their ages, but also the wisdom, maturity, energetic resonance. I felt very safe and supported. Um, the facilitator set a beautiful container, laying down rules, protocols, guidance, just really beautiful guidance that I will leave inside that container. So I won't share explicitly on this recording, but some of it I'm open to sharing in person conversation. Just really, though, just amazing, exquisite, safe container for the experience. And then she opened the ceremony with an opening circle. Everyone shared their intentions. My intentions were many, many pages in my journal, but what I shared essentially was that I wanted healing in my neck, throat, jaw, head, and to clear those blockages to greater self-expression, to stop embodying people pleasing and managing other people's emotions, and to share more authentically. And I also expressed my desire for healing around my heart, to let go of shame and guilt and fear of rejection and fear of judgment, and to just like burn all of it away. To let go of that exhaustion that it is to pretend to be someone we're not. The facilitator, a female shaman, used music throughout the ceremony to guide us. So she has a drum and a rattle, and then there were a couple of points closer to the end where she played music from her laptop over speakers. So we went up two at a time to the altar and were offered a cup of ayahuasca, about a half of a shot's worth, like 1 ounce. There were grapes and cacao nibs that we could, like little pieces of dark cacao that we could eat after drinking the brew. Um, and I found myself really actually enjoying the taste enough to not want to cover it up. So I drank my cup and then I went and sat back down. Um, and I laid down as the facilitator began to drum and to sing and invited the participants to join if we wanted to. Um, I did for a minute, but I was really just feeling called to lay down and to listen, to get really receptive. So I did that. Um, and the first thing I felt was this amazing warm feeling, like starting in my jaw and spreading up into my head. Um, Incredibly warm and very localized to the areas that I was wanting healing in. It wasn't like a general warmth. It was very localized. Um, and I leaned into that. It was very like pleasurable. It was very nice. I leaned into it. Um, and like open to it, like yes, please. um, and and from there I just like dove into these amazing like blissful visuals, wild visuals. I'm far beyond anything I have previously experienced on psychedelics. Amazing, just amazingly complex and vivid and changing in so many different ways. um, and I was so engrossed in them, and to the point where I was not like present in my body, like I felt out of body, but I didn't feel like disconnected from my body. So for example, like if I had if I had the urge to pee, I started to feel that. Like if I felt any discomfort, I was present to that. So I wasn't like disconnected from my body, but when I was in the depths of like my energetic being, I was very present there. I was not present in my body unless it had needs that were wanting to be addressed. Um, And so as I'm like getting so engrossed in these amazing visuals, I start to realize, I'm like, holy fuck, like my perception is what is manipulating these visuals. Like I'm creating what I'm looking at right now. And then and being able to be so intimately present with the correlation between how the visuals were and how I was perceiving them to be, like wherever my mind was at, per se, as I looked at them. And it ignited this deep, full sense, powerful sense of creatrix energy in me, in which I really like embodied, I mean, for the first time in this way. I am creating my reality. And most of the rest of that first round, I was I was reveling in my bliss. I was just laying there so ecstatic, so happy to be me. Would never trade it with anyone else ever. I would never trade. I'm so happy to be me. And I love how that opens so much freedom to desire the same thing for other people. There was a sharing circle about 2 hours after the first dose. And yeah, all I said was something, I mean, so for maybe 4 minutes, I was talking about like, I was like, I'm so glad to be me, you know, I'm reveling in my pleasure. Like, um, I wasn't, I was still pretty deep, so I was not able to articulate nearly as well. And it felt so nice. It felt so good. Like at one when I broke into that, like I was met with like a chorus of laughter, and it was so beautiful to be received in that way. And like these people, like my bliss makes these people happy, right? And it's like, of course, like isn't that how it should be as humans? That my bliss, that you're happy for my bliss and I'm happy for your bliss. And in that we give each other permission to be blissful. During that first round, I barely felt any nausea. It was very light. It was very light, um, deeply, deeply light. And when I went up for a second cup, we were all offered a second round. Um, as I was holding the cup, kneeling in front of the altar, I, you know, communicated my intention, my prayer. I'm like, this is really nice. And I like a little challenge. Like I'm up for a little challenge. Um yeah, so I invited in more darkness. Um, and I did eat a couple of grapes that time. By that time the grapes were sounding really good. Um I was more excited for the grapes than I was for the second cup of Aya, although I was like very like I just like knew I was gonna take it. Like I wanted more, like including more of whatever showed up, like not just the light. Like I went there to do work, and gosh, if it's that fucking magnificent, in the light, like I can be with darkness. I got light for days in the darkness. So I laid back down. I started to feel nauseous. I started to feel, and so the thing to do in my experience with life in general is to lean into what's over there. Lean into it. Lean into it. Let it wash over. Lean into it. It's not going to go away. Um, Conversely, we can set boundaries with something in a way that does give ourselves more space and the other thing more space to change. Um, but first, I leaned into it. I leaned into the nausea, and holy fuck, it got worse. It was getting worse. It was getting worse. And then I switched up methods. I was like, okay, no. And I like very consciously, it was very empowering. I very consciously set a boundary with this nausea. I was um, recalling many years ago being so sick all the time, and throwing up 3 to 5 times a day most days. I became an expert at vomiting, and as I was laying there during ceremony, I was like, fuck no. I know what that's like. I'm not doing that. And I set the boundary, and then I leaned into the boundary, and I dropped down into an even like deeper state of darkness, almost a sense of like briefly kind of passing out, um, just not really being present with anything except the darkness. And then all of a sudden, I started feeling the nausea growing again very quickly, very quickly, very quickly. Um, and I was like, oh, this is not optional. Yeah. So as soon as it became like very apparent that I was going to vomit, yeah, I readied myself for it. You know, I'm like so fucking deep in it, in the in state. But pull myself up and lean over the bucket I have next to my sleeping bag, and have what I will say was the purest, cleanest, smoothest vomit I ever have. Oh my God. Like, she's kind of, the ayahuasca was kind of funny with that. You know, I told her, like, I know what this is like. I know what that's like. And she was like, no, you don't. No, you don't know what it's like. Not with me. And it was just, yeah, there was so much like smooth but forceful energy behind the motion of like my body like rippling out like what was no longer serving, um that it just like all came out like all at once. It was just like done. It was amazingly, you know, kicked the wind out of me feeling, but it was very smooth and very clean, and I actually really enjoyed it. Like, I found bliss in the experience while it was happening. And then after, I was I was like crouched over my vomit. I'm like, so sacred. I'm like honoring my vomit, like honoring the discard. So sacred, you know, and I'm hanging there for long enough that my head starts to like my head like I almost kind of like passed out in my vomit. Like my head like bobs down. And I'm like, oh, I'm like, yeah, it was sacred, but not enough to decorate myself with it. um, so I laid back down, and then kind of went back into the darkness on and off, and there was like emotional processing of fear and what ifs, and um just and learning to not like letting go of victimhood was definitely part of it. Yeah, that was a big one. Definitely in relation to my roots, and yeah, and had a relatively brief period. I mean, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes. What is time? Definitely in that state. What the fuck is time? um, where I had some very visceral, like emotional catharsis that was me like sobbing, and it felt, I mean, like everything else, it felt good when I surrendered to it. And processing foundational relationship in my life, and um, yeah, noting that I don't want to share about that in more detail on the recording. And again, that's something that I am open to sharing more about in person, with some people. But yeah, I did have like kind of a breaking point emotionally in that. Um, It was during the come down period, which I didn't even realize was happening until it had already happened, or been happening for a while. And it was during that part that the facilitator was playing just really beautiful music, like spiritual type music, but very open, um, just beautiful music, spiritually like gentle and uplifting music. Um, yeah, and just really kind of like reached that point of emotional exhaustion and was a little bit feeling that heaviness. And so it was perfect, of course, that next we were invited to a dance party. So the facilitator played music, invited us all to join with our rattles and drums, and we were also welcome to go outside during that point. So at this point, it's like 5 a.m. The ceremony was overnight from 10 p.m. to we closed around 8 a.m. So around 5 a.m. we had a dance party. Um, and that was and I went outside and I grounded and I hugged a tree and touched the dewy wet leaves on the ground, and that felt really good. That really helped me discharge a lot of the like heavy energy that had kind of landed there at the end. um, Went back inside, did some dancing, super fun, so fun. There was a lot of I spent a I spent a good amount of time during that second round. Maybe it was the first round. No, it was the second round. Like sitting up, like in lotus position, and just like fucking dancing, like jamming along with the facilitators singing and drumming and rattling. It was so good. Oh my God, it was so good. It's just, yeah, very like I am the queen of the night vibes. Like, as like there are no lights on, everything's in silhouette, but there are these beautiful, two big beautiful windows like right behind the altar, like I'm sitting right in front of them, and I can see the stars and the trees outside and the blue of the night, the dark blue of the night sky. I'm just like dancing. I'm like, just like, just one of the many moments where I have felt so fucking grateful that I have learned to be with pain so well. So well. It's such a fucking helpful skill. Mm. Yeah. Dance party and then closing circle. Everyone was given the chance to share again. Yeah, sharing is so important. And then we could eat food from the altar and cleaned up. My taxi cab driver was there. Um, yeah, and he took me back to the train station. We were right on time. And this is where I was basking post ceremony. So we're going to arrive at the train station 10 minutes before my train leaves, according to the GPS. And the gate closes 5 minutes before the train leaves. So I'm going to have 5 minutes from getting dropped off to get to the gate. Okay. And I knew that there was no reason I shouldn't make that train. Assuming that all of those things were correct. We got there 5 minutes ahead. The gate closes at 5 till. And I had been in the station only once, but I knew that it wasn't that big. I knew that I could run through it in less than 5 minutes. Okay. So I'm like riding this high of like, I am very certain that if all of those factors are true, that I'm going to make this train. There's no reason for me to not make this train. And yes, I processed on the way there, and if for some reason I don't make the train, I can take the next one. It's not that big of a deal. But arriving, I was so certain I was going to make that train. And then I realized, I was like, oh my God. And I get to have the experience of running to catch a train, which is just, I don't know, it's just like a really cliche kind of experience, like in narrative, like running to catch a train. And I never have before. So it was so cool to like to embody that and to be like, I get to have this experience as I'm like running through the train station, and like I get to tell people this story. This is so cool. And that came from a place of being so fucking certain that I would be on time. And you know what I traded that for? Like, instead of leaving 30 minutes earlier, and having plenty of time, way more than I needed to catch the train, I had 30 minutes of socializing with amazing, beautiful people after the ceremony, And 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 on top of that, I got the experience of ecstatically running through a train station to catch a train. And in the past, old Rose was always super early for everything. She always wanted to be early. And then I swung into a period of being like late for everything. Late. And what I'm integrating now between those like masculine and feminine sides is I am always on time. I literally can't not be on time. Like I'm always on time. And that I'm making it sound so much like simpler here than that's actually been for me to reprogram. That's been a conscious reprogramming process for years now. Um, and just to illustrate, like one of the many things that experiencing ayahuasca has done for me, um, through teaching me to harmonize with that frequency in my own being, the frequency of ayahuasca, is to um, just plant so deeply, like such deep roots of knowing that I am always on time. I am always on time. What is for me cannot pass me by, and what is not for me easily falls away. I don't have to lift a finger. I just do what I want. And I am love. Lovely, loving, and lovable. So what I want is always great. Always beautiful. Always great. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Mm. That was my first ayahuasca experience. This is it. I mean, it hasn't stopped. It's still going. It's still going. I imagine it can go on forever because, again, it's not about the brew, it's about learning to harmonize with that frequency. And I am very receptive, very sensitive, and I have learned how to channel that, how to use that in a way that is beautiful and strengthening and empowering. Um, mhm, hmm. And so I learn. Hmm. Thank you for hearing me, Angie, for prompting me to send this and for being such a beautiful example of goddess incarnate. Mm. Yeah. Hayaya.